just be it'll just be the three of you guys there, right? So here we go.
There's a land just off the Atlantic, land of jungles, waterfalls, and sweet scenery, where poor people farm the lands and hunt the waters, and all live in peace and harmony. This is Guyana, beautiful Guyana.
Good evening, folks. Welcome to this edition of Guyana 2030 and Beyond. My name is David Singh. I'm one of the co hosts for this evening, and along with me is Ms. Davina Bhagat, a journalist attached to Kaichor News, who's co-hosting this edition of this program with me. Uh, and we are very pleased to have with us Dr. Ulric Trotz, Neville Trotz. To many of us who know Dr. Trotz for a bit, and Dr. Trotz has an incredible history of in science and technology, in policy related to climate change, not only in Guyana but across the Caribbean and the Commonwealth. So, without further ado, I would like now to ask Dr. Trotz Neville to give a little bit of taste of who you are.
Thank you, David, and good evening, everyone. Here's my story, really about my professional life. I start with Bartica, where I was born. That's my birthplace, where I spent the first 10 years of my life in the care of my godmother and her family, attending the St. John the Baptist Anglican School, while my mother, Classy Trotz, worked in Georgetown. I left Bartica to join my mother and her brother, my uncle Lionel Barrington Trotz, in Bedford Acting, where he was a teacher at the Bedford Acting Government School. Here I took the Government County Scholarship Examination to compete for one of the two scholarships available for entrance into Queen's College. I did not win one of those scholarships, but qualified at the exam, and on this basis was offered a partial scholarship to attend the Enterprise High School, which was headed by the late R.B.O. Hart. Enterprise was considered to be one of the leading secondary schools in Georgetown at the time. Here, I managed to be successful at the junior Cambridge and then the senior Cambridge examinations, and on the basis of my results of the latter, I won a middle school scholarship to attend Queen's College, fulfilling at last an ambition nurtured from my days in primary school and following the footsteps of previous winners, the late Fred Wills, or former foreign minister of Guyana, followed that path. I entered Queen's in 1953, intended to join the lower sixth form and pursuing studies in English literature, geography, and history. However, on my first day at Queen's, I found out that the principal, Sangha Davies, had just introduced a new form, the fifth remove, which would allow entrance from the high school system to enroll at Queen's and to pursue studies in science. I immediately requested a change of registration, and much to my delight, was permitted to join the remove form to pursue studies in chemistry, physics, maths, and biology. After 1 year, I was successful at the GC ordinary level exam in these subjects and proceeded to spend 2 years in the sixth form, successfully gaining passes in physics, chemistry, botany, and zoology at the GC advanced level examinations. I then left Queen's as a student, but served for a year as a laboratory assistant in the chemistry laboratory at the school. I was awarded a government conditional scholarship in chemistry and in 1957 entered Edinburgh University in Scotland to pursue studies in chemistry. 4 years later, I graduated with an honors degree in BSc honors degree in chemistry. I was designated to assume duties of the Government Analysts Department in Georgetown, but just before graduating, I was instructed by the government in Georgetown to proceed to the Criminal Investigation Department of the Glasgow Police for a crash course in handwriting and ballistics. And after graduation, I proceeded to Glasgow as directed. I have pleasant memories of my 4 years in Edinburgh. At that time, the university had one of the highest overseas student population in the UK, including a large contingent from the Caribbean. There, I had the good fortune to meet Harold Drayton, who was in graduate school pursuing studies for his doctorate. Harry and his wife Kathleen were mentors for many young Caribbean students, and their home was always open to us. There I developed an awareness and pride of my Caribbean roots, about the writings of Selvan, Metalhulza, Laming, Naipaul, CLR, James, Fanon, and in 1959 with Castro's History Will Absolve Me. We had a vibrant West Indian society and an equally active African society. On returning to Guyana in February 1962, just after the riots in Georgetown, I assumed duties at the Government Analyst Department in charge of the Forensic and Toxicology divisions, and at the same time was designated as the country's handwriting and ballistics expert. These were hectic days during the disturbances in Guyana, which kept me busy with the courts. My evidence invariably led to the conviction of my fellow citizens, and after some introspection, led to some discomfort, as I felt that my knowledge was not contributing to the development and improvement of the lot of my countrymen and countrywomen and the development of Guyana. Just about this time, the government announced their decision to start a university in Guyana. By some coincidence, they decided to invite no other than Dr. Harold Drayton, who at the time was lecturing at Kumasi in Ghana, and to be in charge of setting up the university. Unexpectedly, one day, he called me to discuss something highly confidential. I turned up at his office and was stunned by his request for me to start the Department of Chemistry at the new university. Protest as I did, he finally persuaded me, a recent graduate in chemistry, to undertake the task. In this, I was assisted by another colleague of mine, Neville Gordata, who had obtained his BSc Chemistry at the University of St. Andrews in Scotland on a government conditional scholarship, and was also employed at the Government Analyst Department in charge of the Revenue Division. I was permitted to join the university full-time, and together we developed a syllabus for a 4-year BSc Chemistry course with the guidance and support of senior lecturer at UWI St. Augustine, Dr. Marv Sweeney in physical chemistry, and Guyanese Professor Willie Chan at UWI Mona in Jamaica in organic chemistry. We were ready to welcome our first batch of students when the university, then part-time, opened its doors in 1963. Classes were held in the evenings at Queen's College. I spent 3 years teaching organic chemistry at UG, then left Guyana in 1966 on a Canadian Commonwealth Scholarship to pursue further studies in chemistry. In 1970, I received my doctorate in organic chemistry and proceeded home to resume duties as lecturer in the Department of Chemistry at the new campus at Turkine. The next 10 years of my professional life at UG were spent teaching organic chemistry. During this time, I was promoted to senior lecturer and eventually was appointed head of the Department of Chemistry and dean of the Faculty of Natural Sciences. We established programs in natural products chemistry and mineral sciences and had several of our graduates excelling in graduate school overseas. Dr. Halvidar Singh was a student in our first class. He later gained a doctorate in chemistry from the University of Western Ontario and joined the staff at UG. He was one of our outstanding lecturers in physical chemistry and providing sterling services to the department until his untimely death. Several of our graduates returned to serve in the department, including Dr. Marlon Cox, who eventually served as head of the department and deputy vice chancellor of the university. When I returned to UG in 1970, the vice chancellor was Professor Dennis Irvin, himself a chemist, who we recruited from the University of Ibadan in Nigeria. A Jamaican national, he was a firm supporter of the effort to utilize science and technology for development in Guyana and the Caribbean. Locally, he persuaded the government to establish a National Science Research Council. The council had three functioning committees: the Standards Committee, the Science and Industry Committee, on which I served, and the Agricultural Committee. Recommendations of these committees led to the establishment of the Bureau of Standards, the Institute of Applied Science and Technology, and the National Agricultural Research Institute, now the National Agricultural Research and Extension Institute. It is noteworthy that these institutions are still functional today and contributing to the development of Guyana. The IAST was opened in 1980 on the Turkine campus, and I was seconded to the institute as its first director, a post I held until my departure in 1991. The institute established programs in renewable energy, natural products, and mineral sciences, and provided services nationally in analytical chemistry, electronic servicing of scientific equipment, and glass blowing. It established successful programs in solar drying for the agricultural sector, biogas utilization for farmers and institutions, solar energy utilization and microhydro development, ceramics, which led to the establishment of the Vance Ram Table Factory, waste to energy conversion using sawmill waste and rice husk, food technology with particular emphasis on non-wheaten flours. The Institute had full government support with access to UNDP funds for equipment, training of local staff, mainly UG graduates, and for technical assistance. My tenure at the center ended in 1991, and I proceeded to assume the post of Director of the Commonwealth Science Council and Science Advisor to the Commonwealth Secretary General, at that time, Chief Emeka Anyoko of Nigeria. The Council was responsible for coordinating science research across Commonwealth countries and strengthening the capacity of Commonwealth developing countries to use science and technology for development. Through this network, developing countries were able to benefit from the fount of S&T expertise available in Commonwealth institutions. During my tenure, the Science Council was given the responsibility to coordinate and finalize activities leading to the establishment of the Iwakrama International Center for Rainforest Conservation and Development. This center was formally opened in 1996, 5 years after Guyana's offer of part of its pristine rainforests to the Commonwealth to develop an international program addressing the conservation and sustainable use of tropical forest ecosystems. My contract at the Secretariat ended in 1997, and I returned to the Caribbean to assume the post as manager of the Regional Project Implementation Unit for the first climate change program, the Caribbean Planning for Adaptation to Climate Change, CPAC, to be funded by the Global Environmental Facility in the Caribbean. At the time, I was 60 years old, and little did I imagine that I would have been working in the Caribbean in the climate change issue for the next 25 years of my life. Our aim was to determine the nature and extent of the threat of climate change, what was vulnerable to those threats and why, and how we can build a resilience to protect those vulnerable elements. Essentially, our task was to provide the region with the scientific information required to inform decisions on how we achieve a climate resilient and later, as we found out, a zero carbon Caribbean. In the early stages of our work, we realized that the CPAC project could not provide us with the answers we needed and that several other interventions were required. We were also convinced that we needed a permanent regional institutional arrangement to coordinate regional efforts to cope with our changing climate. As a result, heads of government approved the establishment of the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center at their meeting in Cancun in 2002, with one caveat. That is, that the proposed center would not receive subventions from governments. The center was established in 2005 and located in Belize, with a mandate to coordinate the region's efforts to cope with the threats posed by our changing climate. At the time this decision was made, I was the project manager for one of the follow-up projects to the CPAC project. But in 2007, I was appointed as the deputy director and science advisor to the center, a post I held until my retirement in December 2021. And all further regional projects were developed and managed by the center. Looking back on my years in the science and technology arena, I consider that I was fortunate to have had the opportunity to contribute to the birth and survival of several institutions: the chemistry department at UG, the Institute of Applied Science and Technology, the Wakram International Center for Rainforest Conservation and Development, and the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center, institutions that are still functional and making a contribution to development. I also cherish being selected by the late Sir Sridhar Ramphal to be a serving member in the West Indian Commission in 1991, just before I joined the Commonwealth Secretariat. In 1984, I was awarded the Golden Arrow of Achievement by the Government of Guyana for my services to Guyana in science and technology. And in 2003, I was installed as an honorary distinguished member of the UWI Cave Hill campus for my work in climate change in the region. And in 2024, at the Caribbean night of the yearly meeting of the American Meteorological Society, the Caribbean Community of Climate Scientists presented me with an award expressing its gratitude for my outstanding scientific, institutional, and personal contributions in pioneering the region's approach to climate adaptation and resilience, which help advance regional climate policy, institutional frameworks, and the establishment of the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center. I finally retired from the center in December 2021 after a long, challenging, but enjoyable journey in the science and technology arena in the Caribbean and the Commonwealth. That's my story.
Well, Dr. Trotz, this is a remarkable story, and our interlocutors are sitting here backstage waiting to question you about the story. So I'm going to turn it over to Davina and David and have them maybe celebrate this wonderful career that you've just described. It's remarkable. My skin grew listening to you.
Thanks, Terence, for that. And Neville, it's listening to that description of your life. In fact, from the time of schooling all the way through to where you are today, it really helps me, and I think all of us, to reflect. Okay, so we are here today, 2025. And this series is about, Guyana in 2030 and beyond. And really, what we would really like to do is to use this time that we have to really, listen to you a little bit based on all of these decades of incredible experience in the field that you have chosen to really say, as we think about this, let us think beyond where we are today, 2030 and beyond. Obviously, it's a question of understanding where we are today in 2025, and then, of course, pitching our minds to 2030. 2030 is going to be a period of remarkable change, not only in Guyana and around the world. And so it's an important time frame in which to pay attention to. I want to start the ball rolling by, reflecting on the reality that you've been at the forefront of science, of research, and using science in policy setting and decision making. And when I look at Guyana today and I think of 2030, I and not only in Guyana but across the world, it is evident how important it is to include science and technology in the way in which we make decisions. And I'd like to ask, can you reflect a little bit on the progress that we have made over the decades since you have been involved in science and technology at at all sorts of levels, in academia all the way through to policy setting at CARICOM. What progress have we made in the Caribbean in relation to integrated science and technology, really developing evidence-based decision making using science and technology, and where do we go from here?
David, regrettably, I have to say that after years in the S&T arena in the Caribbean, I get the impression at this time that we've let it slip a bit. What I mean, in the earlier days, uh, all of our countries in the Caribbean had a science policy. UNESCO did an excellent job raising awareness at the level of our governments that for development, science and technology is a key ingredient. So this is how Guyana, for instance, had a National Science Research Council, how we had a science policy, etc. And basically, we had in all of in Trinidad and Tobago, you had Cariri. In Jamaica, you had the SRC research. In Guyana, IAST. In the OECS countries, some of them, you had the produce chemists laboratories, which really was dealing a lot with agriculture, etc. But there was an awareness of the need for science, and there was an effort, a genuine effort to integrate science and technology into national development. Move forward to today, we have certainly improved in terms of the information, the science information that we have to inform development. But I think that there is not that bridge uh, really between science and the people who generate the information and those at the policy level who should integrate it into policy. That's a challenge we have. We've worked in climate change, for instance, in the last 20 years in the Caribbean or so, and we generated a tremendous amount of climate information that should be utilized. And we've been trying to sell the idea that climate risk management should be integrated into national development across all sectors, across all activities. But the information is there, unfortunately. For one thing, we as scientists were so underfunded, we didn't have the resources basically to go out with the type of awareness programs that we needed to inject. But I think it is important that we ensure that that link between those who are generating this information are able to get it into the channels of power and policy, and to for for us in Guyana and the Caribbean to uh, inculcate a culture of science and technology.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to jump in at this point, if you don't mind, here, David. And good evening again to Dr. Trotz and all of our viewers that are joining us this evening. Dr. Trotz, I just want to ask you if you believe that enough studies are being done presently to show or to inform Guyanese, rather, how the environment could be impacted by 2030 as a result of the ongoing petroleum activities. We know that it's a growing industry. So, um, how would you respond to that?
Well, for the question of petroleum use is the big issue that we address when dealing with climate change. There's a lot of work done on that, what I will call the generic issue, that climate change, what impact it will have put in Guyana, for instance, on weather patterns, on our agriculture, etc. There's a lot of information that is generated and that is available at this point in time. Uh, we publish now a specific. Previously, it used to be climate impacts in the Caribbean, Latin America, and the Caribbean. But our scientific group, they have developed to the extent that we now have our own separate specific report. That's at the generic level. At the more specific issue about uh, operations in Guyana, the thing is, we can only draw from the experience of oil in other countries, particularly developing countries, and the hazards that we face as a result. One of our drawbacks is that we are starting, unfortunately, from a position where we don't have enough of what we call baseline information about the status, for instance, of our fisheries, about the status of several of our natural resources, that baseline information, so that over time, if we have in place, and I don't think we have that in place as yet, the proper measurement and monitoring facilities, so that we could see what changes are taking place over a period of time. And I think this is something that we need the science and technology community to be at the head of, putting in place systems that would allow us to make measurements, and on the basis of those measurements, come to conclusions which are not based on just conjecture.
Yeah. Yeah. To just to probably add to that point, Neville, and it's not probably not only having the information, but even the information that's available. To what extent is it available enough to stakeholders so that they can actually use that information to be able to uh, to participate effectively in these engagements? Want to extend a little bit to perhaps the beyond just, having science and technology informing decision making. Another area that you highlighted is the work that you did in your period, your time, in setting up the institutional arrangements that were necessary at that time in Guyana. I mean, it's incredible that through the work that was done at that period, with your involvement, um, institutions like NARI exists, IEST, the Bureau of Standards, um, reflecting on the, the current context and looking to 2030 and beyond. What are some of the institutional arrangements you think we should be paying some attention to in Guyana to be able to really respond to um, to the to the opportunities and the challenges that we face today, based on your understanding of where we are?
David, I think it has to be much more deliberate effort than is uh, present at the moment. And I think I still believe that it is important that science, a national science policy, informs our institutional development or institutional arrangements. Uh, we at the and it needs coordination. It's not only about research institutes; it's about your educational system, etc. Just to give you an example, at the University of Guyana, we developed partnerships in the chemistry department with the University of Leeds to introduce a mineral sciences course into the Department of Chemistry. And this was because we were thinking about our mineral resources, not bauxite and gold, but our clays and our kaolin, etc. We did the same thing with the University of Toronto uh, with natural products, laid the groundwork for natural products research later on. So the thing is, you have to develop I think smart partnerships are very much a part of the game. And we trained people in these areas, and these were the people who we then sent overseas for postgraduate training to come back and populate the Institute of Applied Science and Technology. So it doesn't happen by chance. It has to be planned. It has to be a deliberate commitment by those in power to put in place the necessary institutional arrangements that would facilitate the use of science and technology. And at the same time, basically bringing the population up to speed, the private sector, getting everybody involved in the in the effort. We have we have an excellent opportunity, I think, with the LCDS. I think Guyana, as you know, is way ahead of the game in 2009 when we developed our low carbon development strategy. But I don't think that document is a public document in this sense. I don't see communities. I don't see the districts, the different, becoming aware of the document and how the actions that are basically articulated in the document refer to me and is about my security and about my well-being, etc. This is why earlier I said we haven't basically inculcated a culture of science and technology in the Caribbean. it's like, something elite for people who pass through Queens, etc. No, it's about everyday issues that we have to face. So the whole question of I think this is where the Science Council and a National Science Research Council, I'm a strong advocate for that, and for a national science policy that would direct the evolution of the use of science and technology for decision making in Guyana and the rest of the Caribbean.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna come in back and ask Dr. Trotz to be a little bit more specific if you can, because I'd like to know what are your thoughts on how we can, and when I say we, I mean Guyana, how can Guyana improve oversight and governance of the petroleum sector? Like what specific changes do you think are necessary at this time?
Ah, you're putting me there on a sticky wicket, aren't you? No, but the thing is, uh, we are at a terrible disadvantage in the sense that we don't have the capacity to basically provide the level of oversight and the quality of oversight that is required. I wouldn't question, I can't, I'm in no position to question the intent. The intent might be there, but certainly the capacity isn't there. I think early on with the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, the former government had in place IDB supported program to build the technical capacity in the key areas that would have been required to ensure that there is the level and quality of supervision of the operations of the oil industry in the country. But I don't know where that is. But that is key. First of all, you have to have in place the technical skills that will enable you really to provide the type of oversight that I know you are talking about. One way of doing it, as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, smart partnerships, is basically to bring in that level of expertise and train your people on site, hands-on training, developing local staff to have it. And that is not enough. There must be the political will, basically, to ensure that what you require is basically put in place. This is we have witnessed across the Caribbean over the years dealing with environmental issues that having laws and whatnot in place are not. They're usually the more important thing is, yes, they're in place, but is there the will, the political will, basically to enforce? We're weak on enforcement. If you look across the Caribbean, all the islands know that, there's a setback, not building too close to the shore. But when you look at the pattern of development in many of the islands, that has gone overboard. So two things are required: the capacity for oversight, and the second one is the will, the political will, to ensure that there is oversight. I hope that answers your question.
It
Yeah.
does. Thank you very much for that.
uh, Davina, you want to go? I know you had an interest also in a question similar to that. So you want to go with your question and yeah.
Um, well, the next one I have lined up for Dr. Trotz is, can we as a country maintain our title as a carbon sink with 10 FPSOs in operation?
I used to play cricket, and I always was glad that I came low in the batting order, so I didn't have to face the difficult bowling. But here I am. I feel like an opening batsman now with that question. Now, the whole question of carbon neutrality. Uh, Guyana, uh, there there are three studies I know about. One was done. It was environmental impact assessment on this URU development, and basically their conclusion was that the the greenhouse gases that are generated as a result of the oil and gas operations in Guyana are much less than what is sequestered by our forests. So that, that's their study. There was another study done by the, the Energy Authority and the University of Guyana, which came to the same conclusion. Uh, and Guyana basically has been using that as a means of saying that, look, yes, there is this issue with greenhouse gas generation from the operations of the oil and gas industry. But we, as a result of our forestry estate, we are absorbing all of that. Now, there are two things I should say is that the studies basically there are two, as I said, that says yes, that's accurate, and there's another one that is on the other side of the fence. But the wider question is that there is the we are just thinking about the oil and gas in Guyana in terms of the extraction. But if we were to extrapolate and look at how what we generate is utilized overseas and what that adds to the global budget of greenhouse gases, the equation might be different. But in terms of locally, well, as I said, there are three studies that I am aware of. Two of them say yes, Guyana is a net sequestration fund, and one that says that it's not. That in fact, that we are adding to the global budget.
Yeah. I want to check in with you and perhaps broaden it a little bit from Guyana to the Caribbean as well, um, Ulrich, and really want you to really spend a little bit of time talking about this whole concept of net zero. Um, so the Caribbean, CARICOM has made the commitment to becoming net zero by 2050 and to substantially reduce its greenhouse gases by 2030. And the concept would be would be the carbon emissions that it produces um, in each of the member states, um, compared to the carbon reduction from, you know, things like our forests and so on. At the end of the day, in full, we will have net zero. Um, how are we doing, as a region in terms of this whole idea of working towards net zero, and particularly, coming back to Venus' question on oil and gas development, um, recognizing that there is this, I think, distinction between countries, jurisdictions that that are reporting on their emissions per country, and of course the companies. So, for instance, the oil companies themselves, I do believe that they have a responsibility, um, separate from the countries in which they operate. Companies also have a responsibility to address their carbon emissions. But I wanted to ask you about the net zero commitment of CARICOM, and how do you think we're doing, and what can we do more of or differently to meet our targets?
Well, as you know, all of our countries are committed to phasing out the use of fossil fuels as part of this global effort to achieve this net zero status. Uh, but there are a couple of obstacles in the way. The first is that as we phase out, we still are going to need fossil fuels for quite some time. That is the reason why, Guyana, for instance, is producing. The other thing is that to do that needs finance. For us to change the architecture of our energy systems in the Caribbean, you need finance. The finances for that. It's not, and that's a problem. All of us, we have these ambitious plans reporting to the UNFCCC Secretariat. They call this our nationally determined contributions. But these are just expressions of intent. We need to translate those into action programs for the conversion. What is basically delaying action is that we don't have the finance to move in that direction. And this is one of the big problems we have with the global negotiations, climate change negotiations, finance, so how particularly developing countries. Look at Holland, for instance. Their coastline is just like ours, below sea level, but they are able to put in place a flood risks prevention system, management system for a 1 in 1,000 year event. Poor countries like Guyana and other developing countries, we don't have the financial resources to deal with a 1 in 1 yearly event. So finances are key. Now, David, now that you asked me that question, I want to jump ship a little bit and to look at the Caribbean and how the production in the Suriname, Guyana basin, Trinidad and Tobago, the infrastructure, etc. The only way we can achieve that type of transformation in the prescribed time, in the prescribed time frame, is by looking internally at the Caribbean to see if we could basically internalize the entire supply chain for that conversion. By that I mean using the resources in the Guyana-Suriname basin and the whatever infrastructure we have for refinement, etc., to internalize that whole supply of fossil fuels for the rest of the Caribbean as they transform to renewable energy and achieve that net zero status. Also, further, I think that might be one of the best investments for the NRF, the Natural Resources Funds of both Suriname and Guyana, pooled, of course, with other resources from other countries. Because investing in energy is business, is big business. The returns, the internal rate of returns on investments in renewable energy are high, is excellent business. So if we were to have our own internal funding mechanism rather than having to go outside and put ourselves in great debt because of the high rates that we have to pay for loans, then it wouldn't happen. So we have I think we don't have time for discussion on that, but it's an idea. Can we look at our own resources to utilize those resources to facilitate this transformation? And early on, Davina, you did mention it. The question, it was a matter of choice. Why should we basically be going for the natural gas facility instead of going directly for renewable solar energy, for instance? That's a decision basically that, that's a political decision. But the Caribbean, they're moving. Dominica is moving, looking at their what source? The geothermal. For geothermal, there are tremendous geothermal resources in the Caribbean. There are efforts, but they're not taking place at the speed at which we require. And the reason why we are not is because we do not have the financial resources to support either mitigation or adaptation.
Dr. Trotz, I know that David tried to get you to comment on climate change and its impacts on the Caribbean, but I want to just narrow the conversation down a little bit to Guyana and ask you, in light of these developments, and I'm not sure if you can answer this, but in light of these developments that are taking place in Georgetown, and we know that the city is forecast to be underwater by 2030, do you think that we are taking this prediction seriously? And could you explain how we can possibly mitigate or prepare for if this does in fact occur?
Actually, I'm glad you asked me that question. We live in a low-lying coast, and most of our population, most of our activities, our agriculture, for instance, basically takes place along that coast. And right now, we see a lot of development on the coast, lots of infrastructure. But we're putting this in a vulnerable environment. And I feel this is my own feeling is that the highest priority really should be given to securing that coast. I think there was a study carried out by the Dutch. I've tried as I might to get my hands on the results of that study. I haven't been able to, but it was a comprehensive study about sea defense for the entire coastline of Guyana. And I think that it would have been even better if we were able to marry that effort with Suriname next door to look at that whole coast, because the whole coastal dynamics basically, the wider the area we cover, the more comprehensive would be our understanding about the cycles of accretion and erosion, etc., and how to deal with it. We need a comprehensive plan for the protection of the entire coast. We also need to understand the flood risk along the coast. We have I think right now they're carrying out in Guyana what they call LiDAR surveys looking at demarcation of borders, etc. Now, that technology could help us basically to do a survey of the coast and develop comprehensive flood risk maps so that we know where the most vulnerable areas and where we could move to for safety, etc. The securing the coast, I think, should be a top priority. And I don't know, I see in the press announcements about so many contracts being handed out to different contractors for sea defense, rehabilitation, etc. And I ask, is there a master plan? Are these bits and pieces contributing to a whole that is comprehensive? I don't get that impression. I think it's critical. I told you, I mentioned a short while ago about Holland, where they have addressed that issue, and we have the information now about what is likely to happen with sea level rise and with the changing weather patterns, the changing rainfall patterns, etc. We have the information to put in place a very comprehensive sea defense and drainage system for the whole coast of Guyana. I feel that that should have been a priority, and that securing the coast secures the infrastructure that you put on the coast. Anyway, I would mention that. just say I think that the priority should be there.
Thank you so much for that. David, do you have any questions, or can I go ahead? I don't want to seem as though I'm taking over the show.
No, that's quite all right, Davina. There's one that has come in from the audience. They and I'll just read it out, and if you don't mind. And I just cleared with Terence that we could go to 8:15. Yeah, Davina. So we have a little bit more time. Okay. So the note has come in from the Guyana Business Journal and Magazine. Professor Blackman, the Guyana government is working with energy contractors um, to to pipe offshore natural gas for power generation, overlooking the fact that fired natural gas emits 60% of greenhouse gases emitted in the firing of coal. However, conversion of natural gas to cleanly burning carbon neutral dimethyl ether fuel will greatly reduce greenhouse gas emissions. thus enhancing Guyana's quality of life while increasing the nation's electrical power supply. I think it's more of a comment, Neville. I think what this probably does illustrate is they're coming back to your earlier point about the importance of really having science and technology deeply embedded in decision making, focusing on research, and also ensuring that there's a strong strategy on science and technology. Um, do you have any comments you want to add to that, what came in from one of the viewers?
No, not at all. Just the thing about natural gas is that the governments have found this a useful bridge. It is, for instance, here in many countries, they're no longer they're using natural gas basically for conversion into electricity, and it is a feasible option. It also, don't forget, provides feedstock for the chemical industry. And for us in the Caribbean, when we're talking about food security, the fertilizer aspect of the natural gas is very relevant. There again, in internalizing the a key input into agriculture for food security. But the natural gas, as I say, is going to be there for a while. It's regarded as the cleanest fossil fuel that we could use as we transition to net zero.
Yeah, thanks for that, Neville. Go ahead, Tafina.
Okay. I just want to shift gears a little to talk about some of the impacts or some of the complaints we've been hearing from, well, as a result of oil and gas activities offshore. Dr. Trotz, there has been an ongoing debate regarding the impact of the petroleum sector on the fishing industry. From a scientific perspective, could you explain whether these activities could be linked to the decline fishermen continue to complain of?
Well, the evidence is there, not worldwide, that oil and gas operations can and does disrupt, the fishing industry. It's logical because with the activities, you alter the whole, you alter the ecosystem, and as a result, it does have an impact on the health of your fisheries system. From the whatever they put back into the sea, with the disruption of the feeding chain, it does impact fisheries. Yes, the evidence is there that it does, and basically, this is why you have to put in place the type of checks and balances to minimize that effect. There are, well, the problem is that we now have most countries developing marine spatial plans. And in doing that, due consideration is taken for multiple users, including oil and gas. You have oil and gas, transportation, fisheries, etc. And I've been looking at the reports in the press in Guyana. I'm not there, but from what I read in the press, most of the activities with the MSP, Marine Spatial Plans in Guyana, seem to be focused on the oil and gas industry and also our regular commercial shipping, etc. I don't see, it might not be reported, it might be happening, as I say, I don't know, but I don't see other users, particularly the fisher folk, being part of that consultative process in which you start to demarcate boundaries and you start to, I don't know, the other thing is that our countries are committed to 30%, putting 30% of our marine space under the protective areas umbrella. I don't know if that is being included, but part of that demarcation is done basically to ensure that the fisheries, the different users have access to the ecosystem, and that it is in as undisturbed state as possible so that they could continue with their livelihoods. But as I say, I haven't seen that activity, at least it might be taking place, but it hasn't been reported. But that has to be the answer to your question. Yes, it does have an impact, and really is something that needs the highest amount of attention.
Permit me, David, I just want to follow up very quickly. I have two follow-ups actually. Dr. Trotz, I'm not sure if you can say this, but you mentioned that there will be some sort of impact on the ecosystems, but what about the actual fish that we consume? Could fish health be affected by these sorts of discharges, these chemicals that are going overboard? And given what you said about the ecosystems being disrupted, um, this would be you sharing your opinion. Could you say if you believe that Exxon or any other oil company that is operating in our basin, should they be made to compensate fisher folk for their loss of livelihoods?
Well, whether Exxon or any other conglomerate should compensate individuals for loss of livelihoods, it depends on a couple of factors: legal factors, then there are ethical factors, and what we refer to socio environmental factors. The legal factors, I'm not really familiar with the production, the PSA under which Exxon operates, and I would expect that under that they should have clauses that talk about liability and compensation. That normally is that's normal practice. And if there are legal obligations, then certainly people should be compensated. One of the problems that the onus is normally on the sufferer, to show that what their loss of livelihoods is a direct result of some sort of behavior on the part of the perpetrator. Uh, you have to have that chain, but I say it's legal, and again, it depends on the environment, the political environment. The legal instruments might be there. Is there the political will? And I hope there is, to ensure that legal the legal obligations are adhered to, and that this type of thing is enforced. And certainly there is the whole, as I say, the ethical issue, the in terms of the company itself, basically in terms of their whole how people observe them. They should be very concerned that they take a very serious view of this type of issue, and if they're responsible, they should pay. Yeah.
Yeah. I think Neville, that brings us to, I guess, all the way back to your earlier points that you made, the importance of really having evidence-based decision
Yeah.
making.
That's it.
The information that's available, ensuring that information is democratically available to stakeholders, so that they're able to engage in a in a valuable and simple manner with the various issues that relate to their lives and livelihoods. I think that's so important. I
Yeah.
think you mentioned the importance of capacity. You recognize that the importance of really having the technical capacity, ensuring that we have trained graduates who are populating our institutions, building the institutional capacity to be able to respond to these new challenges, and having in place the strategies that are crucial for us to be able to very deliberately look and think forward. And with these things in place, just to, you know, they will add great value in addressing the current issues that we have, and also preparing us for the future. So I really want to thank you yeah, a lot, Neville, for taking the time to prepare for this and to present. And on behalf of Davina and myself, I'd like to thank you so much for your time, and also to thank the viewers, those folks who joined us on online to this event. And do we do look forward to the next feature, which will happen in the course of next month. So thank you so much, and good night all.
Thank you.